I spent a long weekend in Copenhagen, and for most of it, it was rainy and grey, but I did enjoy seeing the random pops of colour throughout the city, from flowers to food to the buildings, and that really brightened my mood. As soon as I arrived at the city centre, I went over to the food market, and there were so many different choices. The Botanical Garden is right next to the market. Since it was February when I was there were no blooming flowers and many of the trees were bare, but I did enjoy the calmness of the park, looking at the statues and the architecture around the park. I didn't take note of the temperature, but I was feeling quite cold spending all this time outside. So as I made my way to the next location, I popped in and out of different stores and I soon arrived to King's Garden. I can imagine this park being really enjoyed in the summertime, people hanging out on the grass and under the big trees. It would really be the place to be. I guess I need to come back to see it like that. I enjoyed walking through it, but as I said, I was cold, so I didn't spend too much time here. It was more just a walkthrough. I walked back through the city centre and I went to this beautiful department store. Got something to eat as well before walking over to Nyhavn, which is one of the first locations that I think of when I think about Copenhagen. I met a fellow traveller in my hostel room and we went to Gasoline Grill for some burgers. The next day, the girl that I met in the hostel and we hopped on a train and we first went to see Frederiksborg Castle and then headed over to the Louisiana Museum of Modern Art. This is truly one of my favorite museums. The variety of art was really great, from paintings to photography, visual art displays, items and artifacts. There was so much to see, and because it was raining, it was a great way to spend a cold day. We were happy to walk around here for a few hours and just enjoy all the different types of artwork. The next morning, I set off early for some solo exploring. I had a bit of a loose plan, but as I always do when I travel, I'm always up for taking a different route or being spontaneous. But I wanted to go see the Little Mermaid statue, and that was what I went to see first. I then went over to a fortress which is quite near the statue and the waterfront. I saw an interesting area on the map as I was looking at the street network and it was kind of interesting. So I walked over to that area and I realized it was an estate of terrace houses. This is the Nyboder district, and these houses were built for sailors about 400 years ago. So I was happy to stumble upon that. My next location involved taking a train to Nørrebro. When I got out of the station, I noticed that there was a cemetery nearby. And I know that it sounds a bit morbid, but it actually seemed like a popular park and there were many people walking through and gathering there, so I did the same thing. I came to this particular neighborhood to visit a street called Jægersborg. Hopefully that's the right way to pronounce it, but online it's described as a hip street for shopping and gourmet dining, and it definitely lives up to all the hype. I really enjoyed walking through the boutiques and the little cafes I admired from the outside. It felt like a very local part of town, and I quite enjoy finding these spots just to feel less like a tourist and see what actual life could be like in Copenhagen. I then walked over to Superkilen Park. I did take a quick stop at a library nearby just to warm up and sit down. It is a park that was designed to celebrate diversity in the community. Next up, I went to a cafe nearby, ordered a hot chocolate and what I thought was going to be a sandwich, but it just turned out to be bread and cheese. Anyway, by this time, I started to make my way back to the city centre. It takes about 40 minutes from Superkilen Park to walk to the city centre. I enjoyed going into some of the stores like this pottery shop and watching people make the glassware right in front of you. I thought that was a really cool experience. After I had dinner at the hostel, I was told about a light festival that was happening over this weekend, and I thought, what great timing. So essentially there were different locations throughout the city that had light displays or music. You could download trails to follow online and they often took you throughout the city. I followed one that was near the waterfront, and I really appreciated the atmosphere that this event created. It was quite family friendly. There were a lot of people out just enjoying the artwork essentially, and lots of photo opportunities as well. I just thought it was a great winter experience to do. The next morning, I was talking to a new group of people at the hostel, and they had made plans to go climb the Church of Our Saviour. I love finding high viewpoints of cities and just being able to see the whole city at the same time. So this was definitely up my alley and I joined them. We took the train, headed over to this part of the city and climbed all the way to the top. We were so happy that it was actually sunny this day. This was the first time that I had seen the sun since arriving in Copenhagen, so I was super pleased with how this all went. This church is right next to Freetown, Christiania, which is a very interesting part of Copenhagen. It essentially is an autonomous area. I would encourage you to look it up. It's super interesting. We walked over to get some lunch. We had planned to visit the Danish Architecture Centre. We were anticipating to learn more about the history, examples of different architecture throughout Denmark, but we weren't too impressed with the exhibition. I can tell you why in the comments if you're interested. After the exhibition, I only had a few hours left before I needed to go to the airport, so we all headed back to the hostel. I grabbed my things, said goodbye, just went back to the city centre and really just walked through some of the streets that I hadn't gone down, went in, did some window shopping. It was really a relaxing way to end my long weekend. That brings me to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions and stay tuned for my next travel video.